Thank you everybody for being here this evening. My name is Brian Holscher. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of MSD. We want to present tonight, there's going to be a proposition on the ballot in April 7th. And we want to provide some information so that you can help you make an educated decision on how to vote on April 7th. Presentation's got three basic pieces. First of all, I'm just going to give you some background on MSD and Project Clear. Next, I'm going to give you some specifics of what's going to happen over the next 4 years, primarily how those were presented to our rate commission. And then finally, I'm just going to give you a one-page slide that really summates the decision that you're going to be asked to make on April 7th. So some quick information about MSD. First of all, the piece we always speak about. We are two utilities in one, a wastewater utility and a stormwater utility. Tonight, we're going to talk about the wastewater portion of MSD. Our service area is 525 square miles, 1.3 million customers served, 90 municipalities are located within our service boundaries. And on the wastewater side, we treat 350 million gallons today. The total amount of sewer approaches about 10,000 miles of sewer. Stormwater, wastewater, and combined sewers we have to maintain. It makes us the fourth largest sewer system in the country. This is a map of MSD's boundaries. Along the right-hand side is the Mississippi River. Along the top is the Missouri River. And for the most part, along the southern edge is the Merrimack River. So we're surrounded on three sides. Our boundaries can be the entire city of St. Louis and the entire St. Louis County. However, we don't go out and proactively annex areas. They ask to be annexed in to MSD. Right now, our boundaries consist of the city of St. Louis and about 90% of St. Louis County out to about 109 in Wildwood. On the map you see shown on the screen, there's two shaded colors. They have to do with the two separate type of wastewater systems MSD has. In the pink is something called a combined sewer system. Both wastewater and stormwater are conveyed in those systems. The city of St. Louis and about 20 square miles of the county are served by a combined system. The balance of the area has two separate systems. One is a wastewater system that carries just wastewater, or is supposed to. And the other system is the stormwater system that only picks up rainfall that falls, runs over the ground, and we convey it to local creeks and streams. Some background on MSD's Project Clear, which is the initiative to address problems with our wastewater system. It's a long-term effort by MSD. It comes from an agreement we have with the US EPA, Department of Justice, as well as the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. It resulted from a lawsuit where MSD was asked to accelerate and have a set schedule for addressing environmental issues having to do with water quality. We will be investing billions of dollars during the duration of this consent decree in order to bring us into compliance with the Clean Water Act. Quick information on some of the components of the program overall. This program started in 2011. One of the first things we want to do, and the cheapest way to solve our issues, is to remove stormwater where it shouldn't be. That stormwater getting into our system is what causes a lack of capacity and then causes overflows and basement backups. Some of those include disconnecting stormwater downspouts. A lot of the area was unfortunately constructed where the home's downspouts are not going out to a wastewater facility, but they're actually connected to the sanitary lateral. That uses up capacity in our wastewater system, can cause basement backups. It also can cause overflows. We use rainscaping in order to capture water before it enters the system and hold it back. That allows additional capacity to remain in the wastewater system. And then we have things like city shed programs and combined sewer separations that in the combined area help resolve some of those same type of flooding and overflow issues that happen in the city and near 20 square miles of the county. Then there is maintaining the system. That's kind of the second thing we try. Once we've removed the stormwater that we can, we want to maintain the system. We want to make sure the sewers work. They work to their maximum capacity. There are not leaks in those sewers that allow groundwater in or potentially allow other things into the system that will block it up and decrease the capacity of the system. And finally, when we're all done with that, if that's not sufficient to eliminate the basement backups and the overflows, we will have to build improvements, tunnels or additional sewers in order to increase the capacity of our system. The proposal that you'll be voting on started with our rate commission. MSD has a rate commission that reviews every proposal that we put out to the public It was established in 2000 as part of a charter change to make sure we had public input into the options that were offered to the public as to how to pay for MSD's Project Clear. It's a 15-member organization. Those organizations are appointed by our Board of Trustees based on a competitive selection, and those organizations then select individuals to serve as their representatives. The proposals that we put in front of the Rate Commission, there are 5 standards in which they have to judge those proposals to make sure that they meet our charter requirements. Our Rate Commission will review those proposals, make a recommendation to our Board of Trustees, and they will then again check that the recommendation from the trustees, from the Rate Commission, meets those charter requirements a second time. So there's 2 reviews of our rate proposal to make sure it meets the requirements of our charter. For this particular proposal, the recommendation from the Rate Commission was sent to our board on August 16th of last year, and it is for our program for our fiscal year 21 through fiscal year 2024. That's a 4-year program that starts on July 1, 2000. The timeline for the Rate Commission to have gotten the results to our board, we submitted our rate proposal to our Rate Commission on March 4th, 2019. They held what was kind of a mini trial. It looks a whole lot like what you would see if you went to the Public Service Commission at the state level, reviewing data, reviewing information, cross-examinations, those types of things. A very extensive public participation and public information campaign that's part of the Rate Commission process. On August 19, 2019, they sent their recommendations to our Board of Trustees, and we're in the process right now, depending on the results of the vote on April 7th, on July 1, 2020, we will change those rates. Some of the objectives, what's going to happen over the next 4 years, we're seeking funding to start an additional $1.6 billion worth of construction and engineering work in order to meet the regulatory needs that are the reason for the consent decree we have with the federal government. What we've offered 2 options to our ratepayers, as we do every 4 years. One, the ratepayers can decide to authorize an additional $500 million in bonding authority for us to borrow some of the money to complete that work or start that work over the next 4 years. The other one is there is always the option that if the public decides not to vote on bonds, then we'll have another option where the public can decide to just pay for cash. And what those impacts are on the rates, I'll address that at the end of the presentation. Again, within that program for the next 4 years, we'll eliminate 50 more overflows from our wastewater system, build 60 new miles of wastewater sewers, inspect 64,000 of our manholes to make sure that they're operating properly and not letting stormwater into the system. We will be replacing the incinerators at the Bissell and Lee treatment plants. We incinerate our sludge. We don't land apply. It is the most cost-effective, environmentally safe way we have of disposing of our sludge. And from regulations that are outside the consent decree, outside of Project Clear, we're required to replace those during this next 4-year cycle. And then finally, there will be another large project as a tunnel that will be built from our Fenton treatment plant, which is located in Fenton, down to the tunnel that's currently near our Merrimack treatment plant. The ultimate goal is to, 1, eliminate the Fenton treatment plant, and 2nd, provide additional facilities for us to eliminate overflows in other parts of the system in the southern part of the district. There were key issues that were considered by the Rate Commission in agreeing to our proposal. 1, I mentioned previously the charter requirements. There are 5 requirements. They need to make sure that our proposal meets all legal requirements, make sure that we are enhancing the service to our ratepayers, make sure that any kind of bond indentures we have for past or future bonding is covered by the revenues that are requested. Make sure we meet federal and state regulations, not just within our consent decree, but other ones, primarily those types of regulations that come from the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. And then finally, the most important review, they review to make sure that the proposed rates are fair and reasonable for all classes of ratepayers. Again, there's 2 options. The first option is to offer a bonding scenario where 60% of the program will be paid for by bonding, 40% will be paid directly. The revenues for that will come directly from the monthly bills that our customers pay us. We do check affordability every time we do one of these proposals. The idea is to get this work done, get it done in an appropriate fashion, make sure we take care of the environment, but make sure that it is affordable to our ratepayers. Again, make sure it's equitable across all classes of ratepayers. An example such as that is some of the industries that discharge to MSD. If their strength is different than what would normally come out of a resident's home, then we charge them extra to provide that extra treatment for the types of facilities, types of flows they may be discharging.
So you rate design based on the type of customer, residential, commercial, industrial?
Yes, we do, yeah. There's two basic categories, residential and non-residential. And then the non-residential, if industries, for instance, have a high-strength waste, there's an extra charge if the sampled waste exceeds a baseline that we have. There's some underlying assumptions. One, customer growth. In our service area, it's basically flat. That's what we put into the 4-year rate cycle. Water usage continues to go down. Since we bill by potable water usage as a substitute for what goes down the wastewater facility, down the wastewater system, we do have to take into account that if less water is used, that means less revenues, and we have to take that into account when we develop the rates. We consider inflation. We've got to make sure we're in compliance with our consent decree, and also we make sure we have sufficient funds for our customer assistance program, and that's a low-income program we have for customers within our district. If they qualify, they're allowed to only pay 1/2 of the rate as a low-income provision. Prior to this rate proposal, there's a lot of savings that we've seen in the program from the previous 4 years. This every 4-year rate cycle actually allows us to capture those savings and turn them back over to the ratepayer. Kind of starting from the bottom of this chart, first of all, our financing costs whenever we have any kind of debt. We're constantly monitoring that, whether we can refinance at lower rates or advance refinance before call dates to lower rates. We're constantly looking at those types of things. We recently just did an advanced refinancing and saved MSD and the ratepayers $45 million in today's dollars as part of an advanced refinancing. We're also looking for cost-effective sources of revenues. We use something called the State Revolving Fund, and that is a loan that we can get from the state. 70% of the interest is paid for by the state. We only have 30% of the interest that we have to worry about paying. There's something called WIFIA. It's a new program from the federal government. It's been in place for 3 years now. It allows us to borrow money from the federal government at Treasury rates, much lower than we can get on the market. And then finally, one of our last big sources of outside funding is the Corps of Engineers. We consistently work with them to make sure if there's anything we're doing that's within their mission and job, we can turn those projects over to them, and they will use federal funds to help us build some of our improvements. Next is the cost of the capital program. I can go through a lot of detail in this, but I will tell you our program is ahead of schedule and under budget from what we originally placed in 2011. There's a lot of reasons for that, both, I will say, the success of my staff, but also the success of the engineers and contractors who do the work for us. If you are interested, as part of this presentation, we have some slides and some information that's over here at the side. One, it shows you what work's going to be done over the next 4 years, and there's some spreadsheets associated with that if you're curious about what those particular jobs are on those dots. But they do represent the start of $1.6 billion worth of work. Operation and maintenance expenses, that's something we can really control. We're constantly looking for ways to save on our daily O&M, what it costs us to run the district. A lot of that has to do with technology, going in and finding better ways to maintain the system. Probably the most cost-effective thing we found, we used to clean and inspect systems with a very large truck that would TV the facilities, that would go ahead and do the cleaning. It's a large truck with 4 people. We've gone to a pickup truck with 2 folks, and instead of actually using TV, we're able to use ultrasonic frequency monitors, and we'll shoot a signal down the sewer, pick it up on another side, and that'll tell us whether or not the sewer's clean. And again, 2 people with a pickup truck is much more cost-effective than 4 people with a very large vac truck in order to do that work. It allows us to really increase the amount that we do, as well as the frequency with which we look at our system. We originally laid down a set of metrics as part of the consent decree as to how often we would investigate our system. Excuse me. As we found out, if we found out that frequency is too high, we've gone back to the EPA, asked for relief to decrease the amount of money we spend on an annual basis. They have been accepting. We've provided good information. They've allowed us to reduce our operating costs that way as well. And finally is the impact of our consent decree. When we originally signed our consent decree in 2011, it was to extend through 2034. Because of some changes in regulations outside of the consent decree, and that has to do with the work we're doing on the incinerators that I mentioned earlier, we went to the EPA and we said, hey, we have the ability per our agreement to make some changes to the consent decree. There are regulatory changes that are outside of what we originally envisioned when we agreed, and the work on the incinerators actually got moved up 5 years. We went to the EPA, told them, hey, there's been a change. We showed them what the financial impact would be, the MSD. They agreed with us, and therefore we got a 5-year extension to our consent decree. So instead of having to be done now by 2034, it's now being done at 2039. All 4 of these items that I've shown, you will see what impact that has on the proposed rates for the next 4 years, a very positive impact, and I'll go over that when I show you exactly what you're going to be voting for on April 7th. And that's where we are. So this is really the story as to what you're going to be voting on. Again, we always offer this to the voters. We are mandated to do this work. The consent decree was signed with the federal government. We are one of hundreds of municipalities who the EPA has decided to have court enforceable schedules to meet the Clean Water Act.
Sure. You mentioned the bond financing. If that's not approved by the voters, the other option, is that a simultaneous option? If the bonds aren't approved, it automatically goes to the second option, or is there another time frame?
So I think that's what I'm going to answer right here on this slide. You got to right where I am. So what the rate commission, what we proposed to the rate commission and what they approved was, we're going to present the voters, if you want to approve an additional $500 million worth of bonding, we have one rate schedule. If you decide not to approve additional $500 million worth of bonding, we have another rate schedule for the 4 years. So what I've shown up here, and for those of you who have the sheet, this is the chart that's showing up on that one-page description. On the left-hand side, we have a rate schedule that says with bond financing. So if on April 7th, the voters vote an additional $500 million worth of bond authorization, the chart on the left is what you will see for the next 4 years. Right now, the typical customer throughout the district pays $55.57 per month for wastewater service. That's our typical customer. Excuse me. If we approve bond financing, you see on the left-hand side of that chart that $55.57 becomes $56.40 1 year, then it goes up to $58.33, and so forth up to fiscal year 24, where the typical customer would be paying $62.59. Now, not everybody is the typical customer. That's why we've also offered the percentages. So whatever your bill happens to be on a monthly average, if you looked at your monthly bill right now, what will happen to it, you can just use the percentages. So whatever your bill is on the first year, come August 2020, your bill will go up 1.5%. The next year, 3.4%, the next year, 3.5%, and the final year it'll go up 3.7%. Something that looks very much like what inflation is supposed to be over the next 4 years. Now, I had mentioned I'd talk about what happens, where do you see those cost savings that I mentioned earlier that we've seen over the last 4 years? The extension of the consent decree, the cost saving methodology. 4 years ago, when we projected what rates we'd be bringing to you, we suspected over the next 4 years we'd be looking at 10% per year increases. That is where we stood. So 2021 would be 10%, 22 10%, 23 10%, 24%. We've taken those savings, we've used those as a starting balance to help pay for the rates, to pay for the cost of the program, and that's what's resulting in us being able, instead of offering 10% per year with bonds, we get something that looks a lot like inflation, somewhere between 1% and 3% per year. Now, what we offer the rate commission also, we say, okay, the public has the right to say we don't want to borrow money anymore. In the long term, just like a house or a car, if you borrow money, you will pay back more than if you paid cash for something. So the public does have that option, and that's the chart on the right. If the public votes no for additional bond financing, you see what the rates will look like for the typical customer for the next 4 years. So again, starts at $55.57. For every rate proposal, we make sure the first year looks the same because we can't always be sure when we'll actually be able to have a bond election. So you see a 1.5% increase, which for the typical customer results in $56.40. But if you just pay cash for this program over the next 4 years, typical customer will go up in 2022 to $65.07. To fiscal year 2023, $76.20. And finally, in fiscal year 2024 to $86.12 for the typical customer. Again, not everybody's typical, so we're also providing the percentage increases to the right-hand side. You can take whatever your bill is and use the first year the 1.5%, and then the double-digit increases up to fiscal 2024 where there's a 13.0% increase, and you can see what the impact to your bill would be if bonding is not chosen by the voters on April 7th. Is there any questions about this chart? Because this is really, from the public, this is really the meat of the issue. If you vote yes, you will see the rate schedule you see on the left-hand chart. If you vote no, what will go in place is the rate schedule on the right-hand chart. Does that make sense to everybody? Is there any questions about that chart? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for this information. The typical, so is the typical with bond financing for metered homes?
So it's typical throughout the district. So for metered homes, that $55.57 is probably typical. For unmetered homes, the number is slightly different. Again, for unmetered homes, we bill based on the attributes of the homes. We're required by state,
Do you have a chart showing how the bond financing would be for a unmetered typical home?
not for
And
typical.
is typical average?
It is typical, is the one that most people pay. Right now, if the average utilization throughout the district is 6 CCF or 600 cubic feet per month, and so that's what's listed as being the typical customer. If you're an unmetered customer,
Oh, I see down there. It
yeah,
does
if
say
you take if you want to be the unmetered customer, you can take your current bill, and on fiscal 21, under this proposal with bonding, you can take it times 1.5%, and that will be the increase in your bill. As a matter of fact, that's the same increase for metered customers as well. Because metered customers aren't all $5.57. Some are much higher, some are much lower, depending on their water usage. And then the second year at 3.4%, third year 3.5%, and the fourth year 3.7%. So while we're showing the typical customer just to give reference, there's a lot of people will be different because their monthly bill looks different from MSD, but it will go up by those percentages.
Because 600 cubic feet sounds kind of high to me for,
It's actually much lower than what the typical customer would use, say, 10 years ago. But it is pretty reflective of what's going on throughout the rest of the country. At one time, it was 8 CCF, not that long ago. Because of water-saving measures that go into home, water-saving devices, water-saving practices, the amount of billable units continue to go down. And we base it on whatever we project will be the typical usage throughout the district so we can set a proper unit rate.
because it's 600, like synonymous with 6 CCFs?
So 600 cubic feet
Feet
per
per
month.
month.
A cubic feet is 7.8 gallons. Help me out, guys, if I got that correct?
Yeah, she's correct. It's equivalent to 6 CCF.
6 CCF is 600, right. And a cubic foot is there's about 8 gallons in a cubic foot. Am I got that right?
Yeah, that's a lot
Okay.
of water.
Yes, it is. So it's 4,800 cubic feet per month. 4,800 gallons per month, or 600 cubic feet per month. There are any other questions about this chart? This is really the decision the ratepayers have to make. Okay, that is the presentation. We're here, our sole goal is to make sure you understand come April 6th what it is you're voting on and what the consequences are, whether you vote yes or whether you vote no. Are there any other questions at all? If you've got questions about things other than the presentation, we have a lot of staff here. If you have other wastewater questions that don't have to do with this proposal, we've got staff who can answer those questions. If you've got other questions having to do with stormwater, we have staff here that can answer that also. It's not the topic we're talking about tonight, but we can answer those questions as well once the meeting's over. So that's the end of the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for attending.